Chapter 22. King Pellinore arrived for the important weekend in a high state of flurry. "I say," he exclaimed, "do you know? Have you heard? Is it a secret? What?" "Is what a secret what?" they asked him. "Why, the king!" cried his majesty. "You know about the king?" "What's the matter with the king?" inquired Sir Ector. "You don't say he's coming down to hunt with those damned hounds of his, or anything like that?" "He's dead!" cried King Pellinore tragically. "He's dead, poor fellow, and can't hunt any more." Sir Grummore stood up respectfully and took off his helm. "The king is dead," he said. "Long live the king." Everybody else felt they ought to stand up too, and the boy's nurse burst into tears. There, she sobbed. "His Loyal Highness dead and gone, and him such a respectful gentleman. Many's the illuminated picture I've cut out of him from the illustrated missals, aye, and stuck up over the mantel, from the time when he was in swaddling bands, right through the world towers, till he was a visiting the dispersed areas as a world's Prince Charming. There wasn't a picture of him but I had it out, aye, and give him a last thought o' night."
"Compose yourself, Nanny,"
said Sir Ector. "It's solemn, isn't it?" said King Pellinore. "What?"
"A solemn moment,"
said Sir Grummore.
"The king is dead. Long live the king."
"We ought to pull down the blinds," said Kay, who was always a stickler for good form, "or half-mast the banners."
"That's right,"
said Sir Ector.
"Somebody go and tell the sergeant at arms."
It was obviously the Wart's duty to execute this command, for he was now the junior of all the noblemen present, and so he ran out cheerfully to find the sergeant. Soon those who were left in the solar could hear a voice crying out,
"Now then, 1, 2, special morning for His Light Majesty. Lower away on the command 2."
and then the flapping of all the standards, banners, pennons, pinoncelles, banderoles, guidons, streamers, and cognizances, which made gay the snowy turrets of the forest sauvage.
"How did you hear?"
asked Sir Ector. "I was just pricking through the purlieus of the forest after that beast, you know, when I met with the solemn friar of Orders Grey, and he told me. It's the very latest news."
"Poor old Pendragon,"
said Sir Ector.
"The king is dead."
said Sir Grummer solemnly.
"Long live the king."
"It's all very well for you to keep on mentioning that, my dear Grummore," exclaimed King Pellinore petulantly. "But who is this king, what, that is to live so long, what, according to you?"
"Well, his heir,"
said Sir Grummore, rather taken aback. "Oh, blessed monarch," said the nurse tearfully, "never had no hair. Anybody that studied the loyal family knowed that."
"Good gracious!"
exclaimed Sir Ector.
"But he must have had a next of kin."
"That's just it," cried King Pellinore in high excitement. "That's the exciting part about it, what? No hair and no next of skin, and who's to succeed to the throne? That's what my friar was so excited about. What?"
"Do you mean to tell me,"
exclaimed Sir Grummore indignantly,
"that there ain't no king of England?"
"Not a scrap of one," cried King Pellinore, feeling most important. "And there have been signs and wonders of no mean might."
"I think it's a scandal,"
said Sir Grummore.
"God knows what the dear old country is coming to. It's these Bolshevists, no doubt." What sort of signs and wonders?
asked Sir Ector. Well, there has appeared a sort of sword in a stone, what? In a sort of a church. Not in the church, if you see what I mean, and not in the stone, but that sort of thing, what? Like you might say.
I don't know what the church is coming to,
said Sir Grummore.
It's in the anvil,
explained the king.
The church? No, the sword.
But I thought you said the sword was in the stone.
No,
said King Pellinore.
The stone is outside the church. Look here, Pellinore,
said Sir Ector.
You have a bit of a rest, old boy, and start again. Here, drink up this horn of mead and take it easy.
The sword, said King Pellinore, is stuck through an anvil which stands on a stone. It goes right through the anvil and into the stone. The anvil is stuck to the stone. The stone stands outside a church. Give me some more mead.
I don't think that's much of a wonder, remarked Sir Grummore. What I wonder at is that they should allow such things to happen. But you can't tell nowadays, what with all these socialists.
My dear fella, cried Pellinore, getting excited again, it's not where the stone is that I'm trying to tell you, but what is written on it. What? Where it is.
What?
Why, on its pommel.
Come on, Pellinore,
said Sir Ector.
You just sit quite still with your face to the wall for a minute, and then tell us what you are talking about. Take it easy, old fruit. No need for hurrying. You sit still and look at the wall. There's a good chap, and talk as slow as you can.
There are words written on this sword in this stone outside this church, cried King Pellinore piteously, and these words are as follows. Oh, do try to listen to me, you two, instead of interrupting all the time about nothing, for it makes a man's head go ever so.
What are these words?
asked Kay.
These words say this, said King Pellinore. So far as I can understand from that old friar of orders gray.
Go on, do, said Kay, for the king had come to a halt.
Go on,
said Sir Ector.
What do these words in this sword, in this anvil, in this stone outside the church say? Some red propaganda, no doubt, remarked Sir Grummore. King Pellinore closed his eyes tight, extended his arms in both directions, and announced in capital letters, Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil, his right wise king, born of all England. Who said that? asked Sir Grummore. But the sword said it, like I tell you. Talkative weapon, remarked Grummore skeptically. It is written on it, cried the king angry. Written on it in letters of gold. Why didn't you pull it out then? Asked Sir Grummore. But I tell you that I wasn't there. All this that I am telling you was told to me by the friar. I was telling you of, like I tell you. Has this sword with the inscription been pulled out? Inquired Sir Ector. No, whispered King Pellinore dramatically. That's where the whole excitement comes in. They can't pull this sword out at all, although they have all been trying like fun. And so they have had to proclaim a tournament all over England for New Year's Day, so that the man who comes to the tournament and pulls out the sword can be King of England forever. What? I say? Oh, father, cried Kay, the man who pulls out that sword out of the stone will be the King of England. Can't we go to this tournament, father, and have a shot? Couldn't think of it, said Sir Ector. Long way to London,
said Sir Grumore, shaking his head.
My father went there once,
Said King Pellinore. Kay said,
Oh, surely we could go. When I am knighted, I shall have to go to a tournament somewhere, and this one happens at just the right date. All the best people will be there, and we should see the famous knights and great kings. It doesn't matter about the sword, of course, but think of the tournament. Probably the greatest there has ever been in England, and all the things we should see and do. Dear father, let me go to this tourney, if you love me, so that I may bear away the prize of all in my maiden fight. But, Kay,
said Sir Ector.
I have never been to London. All the more reason to go. I believe that anybody who doesn't go for a tournament like this will be proving that he has no noble blood in his veins. Think what people will say about us if we don't go and have a shot at that sword. They will say that Sir Ector's family was too vulgar and knew it had no chance. We all know the family has no chance,
said Sir Ector.
That is, for the sword. Lot of people in London,
remarked Sir Grumore, with a mild surmise.
So they say.
He took a deep breath and goggled at his host with eyes like marbles. And shops, added King Pellinore suddenly, also beginning to breathe heavily.
Dang it,
cried Sir Ector, bumping his horn mug on the table so that it spilled.
Let's all go to London, then, and see the new king.
They rose up as one man.
Why shouldn't I be as good a man as my father?
Exclaimed King Pellinore.
Dash it all,
cried Sir Grumore.
After all, damn it all, it is the capital. Hooray!
Shouted Kay. Lord have mercy, said the nurse. At this moment the wart came in with Merlin, and everybody was too excited to notice that, if he had not now been grown up, he would have been on the verge of tears.
Oh, wart,
cried Kay, forgetting for the moment that he was only addressing his squire, and slipping back into the familiarity of their boyhood.
What do you think? We're all going to London for a great tournament on New Year's Day.
Are we?
Yes, and you will carry my shield and spears for the jousts, and I shall win the palm off everybody and be a great knight.
Well, I am glad we are going, said the wart, for Merlin is leaving us too.
Oh, we shan't need Merlin.
He is leaving us, repeated the wart.
Leaving us?
Asked Sir Ector.
I thought it was we that were leaving.
He is going away from the forest Sauvage, Sir Ector said.
Oh, come now, Merlin. What's all this about? I don't understand all this a bit.
I have come to say goodbye, Sir Ector, said the old magician. Tomorrow my pupil Kay will be knighted, and the next week my other pupil will go away as a squire. I have outlived my usefulness here, and it is time to go.
No, no, don't say that,
said Sir Ector.
I think you're a jolly useful chap, whatever happens. You just stay here and teach me, or be the librarian or something. Don't you leave an old man alone after the children have flown.
We shall all meet again, said Merlin. There's no cause to be sad.
Don't go,
said Kay. I must go, replied their tutor. We have had a good time while we were young, but it is in the nature of time to fly. There are many things in other parts of the kingdom which I ought to be attending to just now. It is a specially busy time for me. Come, Archimedes, say goodbye to the company. Goodbye, said Archimedes tenderly to the wart. Goodbye, said the wart, without looking up at all.
But you can't go,
cried Sir Ector.
Not without a month's notice.
Can't I? Replied Merlin. taking up the position always assumed by philosophers who propose to dematerialize. He stood on his toes, while Archimedes, held tight to his shoulder, began to spin on them, slowly, like a top, spun faster and faster till he was only a blur of grayish light, and in a few seconds there was no one there at all. "Goodbye, Wart!" cried two faint voices outside the solar window. "Goodbye," said the Wart for the last time, and the poor fellow went quickly out of the room. 23. The knighting took place in a whirl of preparations. Kay's sumptuous bath had to be set up in the box room, between two towel horses and an old box of selected games which contained a worn-out straw dartboard. It was called flechette in those days, because all the other rooms were full of packing. The nurse spent the whole time constructing new warm pants for everybody, on the principle that the climate of any place outside of the Forest Sauvage must be treacherous to the extreme. And as for the sergeant, he polished all the armor till it was quite brittle, and sharpened the swords till they were almost worn away. At last it was time to set out. Perhaps, if you happen not to have lived in the old England of the 15th century, or whenever it was, and in a remote castle on the borders of the Marches at that, you will find it difficult to imagine the wonders of their journey. The road, or track, ran most of the time along the high ridges of the hills or downs, and they could look down on either side of them upon the desolate marches where the snowy reeds sighed, and the ice crackled, and the duck in the red sunsets quacked loud on the winter air. The whole country was like that. Perhaps there would be a moory marsh on one side of the ridge, and a forest of 30,000 acres on the other, with all the great branches weighted in white. They could sometimes see a wisp of smoke among the trees, or a huddle of buildings far out among the impassable reeds, and twice they came to quite respectable towns which had several inns to boast of. But on the whole it was an England without civilization. The better roads were cleared of cover for a bow-shot on either side of them, lest the traveller should be slain by hidden thieves. They slept where they could, sometimes in the hut of some cottager who was prepared to welcome them, sometimes in the castle of a brother knight who invited them to refresh themselves, sometimes in the firelight and fleas of a dirty little hovel with a bush tied to a pole outside it. This was the signboard used at the time by inns. And once or twice on the open ground, all huddled together for warmth between their grazing chargers. Wherever they went, and whenever they slept, the east wind whistled in the reeds, and the geese went over high in the starlight, honking at the stars. London was full to the brim. If Sir Ector had not been lucky enough to own a little land in Pye Street, on which there stood a respectable inn, they would have been hard put to it to find a lodging. But he did own it, and as a matter of fact drew most of his dividends from this source, so that they were able to get 3 beds between the 5 of them. They thought themselves fortunate. On the first day of the tournament, Sir Kay managed to get them on the way to the lists at least an hour before the jousts could possibly begin. He had lain awake all night, imagining how he was going to beat the best barons in England, and he had not been able to eat his breakfast. Now he rode at the front of the cavalcade, with pale cheeks, and Wart wished there was something he could do to calm him down. For country people who only knew the dismantled tilting ground of Sir Ector's castle, the scene which now met their eyes was really ravishing. It was a huge green pit in the earth, about as big as the arena at a football match. It lay about 10 feet lower than the surrounding country, with sloping banks, and all the snow had been swept off it. It had been kept warm with straw, which had been cleared off that morning, and now all the close-mown grass sparkled green in the white landscape. Round the arena there was a world of colors so dazzling and moving and twinkling as to make you blink your eyes. The wooden grandstands were painted in scarlet and white. The silk pavilions of famous people, pitched on every side, were azure and green and saffron and checkered. The pennons and pinnaces, which floated everywhere in the sharp wind, were flapping with every color of the rainbow as they strained and slapped at their flagpoles, and the barrier down the middle of the arena itself was done in chessboard squares of black and white. Most of the combatants and their friends had not yet arrived, but you could see from those few who had arrived how the very people would turn the scene into a bank of flowers, and how the armor would flash, and the scalloped sleeves of the heralds jig in the wind, as they raised their brazen trumpets to their lips to shake the fleecy clouds of winter with joyances and fanfares.
Good heavens, cried Sir Kay. I have left my sword at home. Can't joust without a sword, said Sir Grimble. Quite irregular. Better go and fetch it, said Sir Ector. You have time. My squire will do, said Sir Kay. What a damned mistake to make. Here, squire, ride hard back to the inn and fetch my sword. You shall have a shilling if you fetch it in time.
The wart went as pale as Sir Kay was, and looked as if he were going to strike him. Then he said, "It shall be done, master," and turned his stupid little ambling palfrey against the stream of newcomers. He began to push his way towards their hostelry as best he might. "To offer me money," cried the wart to himself, "to look down at this beastly little donkey affair off his great charger, and call me squire! Oh, Merlin, give me patience with the brute, and stop me from throwing his filthy shilling in his face." When he got to the inn, it was closed. Everybody had thronged out to see the famous tournament, and the entire household had followed after the mob. Those were lawless days, and it was not safe to leave your house, or even to go to sleep in it, unless you were certain that it was impregnable. The wooden shutters bolted over the downstairs windows were 2 inches thick, and the doors were double barred. "Now what do I do," said the wart, "to earn my shilling?" He looked ruefully at the blind little inn and began to laugh. "Ha, ha! Poor Kay," he said. "All that shilling stuff was only because he was scared and miserable, and now he has good cause to be. Well, he shall have a sword of some sort if I have to break into the Tower of London. How does one get hold of a sword?" he continued. "Where can I steal one? Could I waylay some knight, even if I am mounted on an ambling pad, and take his weapons by force? There must be some swordsmith or armorer in a great town like this, whose shop would be still open." He turned his mount and cantered off along the street. There was a quiet churchyard at the end of it, with a kind of square in front of the church door. In the middle of the square there was a heavy stone with an anvil on it, and a fine new sword was struck through the anvil. "Well," said the wart, "I suppose it's some sort of war memorial, but it will have to do. I'm quite sure nobody would grudge Kay a war memorial if they knew his desperate straits." He tied his reins round a post of the lich gate, strode up the gravel path, and took hold of the sword. "Come, sword," he said, "I must cry your mercy and take you for a better cause." "This is extraordinary," said the wart. "I feel queer when I have hold of the sword, and I notice everything much more clearly. Look at the beautiful gargoyles of this church, and of the monastery which it belongs to. See how splendidly all the famous banners in the aisle are waving. How nobly that yew holds up the red flakes of its timbers to worship God. How clean the snow is. I can smell something like featherfew and sweetbriar. And is that music I hear? It was music, whether of panpipes or of recorders, and the light in the churchyard was so clear without being dazzling that you could have picked a pin out 20 yards away. There's something in this place, said the ward. There are people here. Oh, people, what do you want? Nobody answered him, but the music was loud and the light was beautiful. People, cried the ward, I must take this sword. It is not for me, but for Kay. I will bring it back. There was still no answer, and Wart turned back to the sword. He saw the golden letters on it, which he did not read, and the jewels on its pommel, flashing in the lovely light. Come, sword, said the ward. He took hold of the handles with both hands and strained against the stone. There was a melodious consort on the recorders, but nothing moved. The wart let go of the handles when they were beginning to bite into the palms of his hands, and stepped back from the anvil, seeing stars. It is well fixed, said the wart. He took hold of it again and pulled with all his might. The music played more and more excitedly, and the lights all about the churchyard glowed like amethyst, but the sword still stuck. Oh, Merlin, cried the wart, help me get the sword. There was a kind of rushing noise, and a long cord played along with it. All round the churchyard there were hundreds of old friends. They rose over the church wall all together, like the Punch and Judy ghosts of remembered days, and there were otters and nightingales and vulgar crows and hares and serpents and falcons and fishes and goats and dogs and dainty unicorns and newts and solitary wasps and goat moth caterpillars and corkendrills and volcanoes and mighty trees and patient stones. They loomed round the church wall, the lovers and helpers of the wart, and they all spoke solemnly in turn. Some of them had come from the banners in the church, where they were painted in heraldry, some from the waters and the sky, and the fields about, but all, down to the smallest shrew mouse, had come to help on account of love. Wart felt his power grow.
Remember my biceps, said the oak, which can stretch out horizontally against gravity when all the other trees go up or down.
Put your back into it, said a loose, or pike, off one of the heraldic banners, like you did once when I was going to snap you up. Remember that all power springs from the nape of the neck.
What about those forearms? Asked the badger gravely, that are held together by a chest. Come along, my dear embryo, and find your tool.
A merlin, sitting on the top of the yew tree, cried out, Now then, Captain Wart, what is the first law of the foot? I thought I once heard something about never letting go. Don't work like a stalling woodpecker, urged a tawny owl affectionately. Keep up a steady effort, my duck, and you will have it yet.
Go here,
said a stone in the church wall. A snake, slipping easily along the coping which bounded the holy earth, said, Now then, Wart, if you were once able to walk with 300 ribs at once, surely you can coordinate a few little muscles here and there, make everything work together as you've been learning to do every day since God let the amphibia crawl out of the sea. Fold your powers together with the spirit of your mind. Come out like butter. Come along, Homo sapiens, for all we humble friends of yours are waiting to cheer. The wart walked up to the great sword for the third time. He put out his right hand softly and drew it out as gently as from a scabbard. There was a lot of cheering, a noise like a hurdy-gurdy which went on and on. In the middle of this noise, after a very long time, he saw Kay and gave him the sword. The people at the tournament were making a frightful row.
But this isn't my sword,
said Sir Kay. It was the only one I could get, said the ward. The inn was locked.
It is a nice-looking sword. Where did you get it?
I found it stuck in a stone outside a church. Sir Kay had been watching the tilting nervously, waiting for his turn. He had not paid much attention to his squire.
That's a funny place to find a sword,
he said. Yes, it was stuck through an anvil.
What?
cried Sir Kay, suddenly rounding upon him.
Did you just say this sword was stuck in a stone?
It was, said the ward. It was a sort of war memorial. Sir Kay stared at him for several seconds in amazement, opened his mouth, shut it again, licked his lips, then turned his back and plunged through the crowd. He was looking for Sir Ector, and the ward followed after him.
Father,
cried Sir Kay,
come here a moment. Yes, my boy,
said Sir Ector.
Splendid falls these professional chaps do manage. Why, what's the matter, Kay? You look as white as a sheet. Do you remember that sword which the King of England would pull out? Yes. Well, here it is. I have it. It is in my hand. I pulled it out.
Sir Ector did not say anything silly. He looked at Kay and he looked at the wart. Then he stared at Kay again, long and lovingly, and said,
We will go back to the church. Now then, Kay,
he said, when they were at the church door. He looked at his firstborn again, kindly, but straight between the eyes.
Here is the stone, and you have the sword. It will make you the King of England. You are my son that I am proud of, and always will be, whatever happens. Will you promise me that you took it out by your own might?
Kay looked at his father. He also looked at the wart and at the sword. Then he handed the sword to the wart quite quietly. He said,
I am a liar. Wart pulled it out.
As far as the wart was concerned, there was a time after this in which Sir Ector kept telling him to put the sword back into the stone, which he did, and in which Sir Ector and Kay then vainly tried to take it out. The wart took it out for them, and stuck it back again once or twice. After this, there was another time, which was more painful. He saw that his dear guardian, Sir Ector, was looking quite old and powerless, and that he was kneeling down with difficulty on a gouty old knee.
Sir,
said poor old Sir Ector, without looking up, although he was speaking to his own boy. Please don't do this, father, said the wart, kneeling down also. Let me help you up, Sir Ector, because you are making me unhappy.
Nay, nay, my lord,
said Sir Ector, with some very feeble old tears.
I was never your father, nor of your blood, but I wot well you are of a higher blood than I wend ye were.
Plenty of people have told me you're not my father, said the wart, but it doesn't matter a bit.
Sir,
said Sir Ector, humbly,
will ye be my good and gracious lord when ye are king?
Don't, said the wart.
Sir,
said Sir Ector,
I will ask no more of you, but that you will make my son your foster brother, Sir Kay, seneschal of all your lands.
Kay was kneeling down too, and it was more than the wart could bear. "Oh, do stop!" he cried. "Of course he can be seneschal, if I have got to be this king. And, oh, father, don't kneel down there like that, because it breaks my heart. Please get up, Sir Ector, and don't make everything so horrible. Oh dear, oh dear, I wish I'd never seen that filthy sword at all." And the wart burst into tears. 24. Perhaps there ought to be one more chapter about the coronation. The barons naturally kicked up a dreadful fuss, but as the wart was preparing to go on putting the sword in the stone and pulling it out again till doomsday, and as there was nobody else who could do the thing at all, in the end they had to give in. A few revolted, who were quelled later, but in the main the people of England were glad to settle down. The coronation was a splendid memory, and what was still more splendid, it was like a birthday or Christmas Day. Everybody sent presents to the wart for his prowess in having learned to pull sword out of stones, and several burghers of the city of London asked him to help them in taking stoppers out of unruly bottles, unscrewing taps which had got stuck, and in other household emergencies which had got beyond their control. The dog boy and Watts clubbed together and sent him a mixture for the distemper, which contained quinine and was absolutely priceless. Goat sent him a watch chain plated out of his own beard. Cavall came quite simply and gave him his heart and soul. The nurse of the forest sauvage sent a cough mixture, 30 dozen handkerchiefs, all marked, and a pair of combinations with a double chest. The sergeant sent him his medals to be preserved in the British Museum. Hob lay awake in agony all night and sent off Coley with brand new white leather jesses, silver varvels, and silver bell. Robin and Marion went out on an expedition which took them 6 weeks, and sent a whole gown made out of the skin of pine martens. Little John added a yew bow 7 feet long, which he was quite unable to draw. An anonymous hedgehog sent 4 or 5 dirty leaves with some fleas on them. The questing beast and King Pellinore put their heads together and sent some of their most perfect fumets, all wrapped up in the green leaves of spring in a golden horn with a red velvet baldric. Sir Grummore sent a gross of spears, with the old school crest on all of them. The vicar chose a work called De Clericalia Disciplina, attributed to Petrus Alphonsus, which would be read at nights and did not have to be explained. The cooks, tenants, villeins, and retainers of the castle of the forest sauvage, who were all given an angel each and sent up for the ceremony in a char à banc at Sir Ector's charge, brought an enormous silver model of cow Crumbach, who had won the championship for the 3rd time, and Ralph Pestlehue to sing at the coronation banquet. Archimedes sent his own great-great-grandson so that he could sit on the back of the king's throne at dinner and make messes in the soup. The Lord Mayor and aldermen of the city of London subscribed for a spacious aquarium musicum menagerie, in which all the creatures were starved 1 day a week for the good of their stomachs, and here, for the fresh food, good bedding, constant attention, and every modern convenience, all the wart's friends resorted in their old age, on wing and foot and fin, for the sunset of their happy lives. The citizens of London sent £50,000,000 to keep the menagerie up, and the ladies of Britain constructed a pair of black velvet carpet slippers with the wart's initials embroidered on in gold. Kay sent his own record Scythian, with honest love. There were many other tasteful presents from various barons, archbishops, princes, landgraves, tributary kings, corporations, popes, sultans, royal commissions, urban district councils, czars, beys, mahatmas, and so forth. But the nicest present of all was sent most affectionately by his own guardian, old Sir Ector. This present was a dunce's cap, rather like a pharaoh's serpent, which you lit at the top end. The wart lit it and watched it grow. When the flame had quite gone out, Merlin was standing before him in his magic hat.
"Well, Wart," said Merlin, "here we are, or were, again. How nice you look in your crown! I was not allowed to tell you before or since, but your father was, or will be, King Uther Pendragon, and it was I myself, disguised as a beggar, who first carried you to Sir Ector's castle in your golden swaddling bands. I know all about your birth and parentage, and who gave you your real name. I know the sorrows before you, and the joys, and how there will never again be anybody who dares to call you by the friendly name of Wart. In future it will be your glorious doom to take up the burden and to enjoy the nobility of your proper name. So now I shall crave the privilege of being the very first of your subjects to address you with it as my dear liege lord, King Arthur."
Will you stay with me for a long time? Asked the wart, not understanding much of this.
"Yes, Wart," said Merlin, "or rather, as I should say, or is it have said, yes, King Arthur."
The beginning.